Welcome to Thinking Deeper by 6-7. Today we are watching Worlds Collide. We have a man who claims he's written books on dinosaur history facing off against an atheist activist. We have a debate over whether humans are born sinful or good, whether morality exists without a Bible, and surprisingly, whether pineapple belongs on pizza. It is a raw look at God, atheism, and the messy middle ground between them.
It is messy.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's a difficult look at times. We are analyzing a transcript today from a middle ground session that was produced by Jubilee. The title of the session is Atheists and Christians Debate Truth and Belief. And if you've ever found yourself in a conversation, at a dinner party that suddenly went off the rails because someone brought up religion or politics, this is going to feel very, very familiar to you.
Oh, absolutely. It's that visceral feeling of watching a train wreck in slow motion, but you also realize you're learning a lot about how trains work, or I guess how they break, by watching them crash.
That's a fantastic way to put it. The premise of the show, for those who don't know, is deceptively simple. You take a group of strangers, in this case, some are devout Christians, others are atheists, agnostics, or, secular humanists, and you put them in a circle.
And they just talk.
Well, they're given prompts, usually controversial statements, and they have to step forward if they agree or stay back if they disagree, and then discuss their perspectives. The mission of our deep dive today is to deconstruct how these opposing sides communicate, or, as we'll see pretty frequently today, how they fail to communicate.
It really feels like a masterclass in talking past each other.
It is. We're going to focus specifically on, I think, three main pillars here. Their definitions of truth, their arguments regarding the origins of morality, and ultimately how they assign value to a human life. Because as we go through this transcript, you realize they aren't just disagreeing on facts, they are operating in two completely different realities.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because right out of the gate, the conversation hits a wall. And that wall is built entirely out of definitions.
This is section 1, the battle of definitions. And honestly, it's one of the most fascinating psychological moments in the entire transcript. It centers on this really tense exchange between a participant named Jeremy, who is a very firm Christian believer, and Kenneth, who identifies as an atheist.
So set the scene for us. What kicks this off?
The group is discussing the nature of belief. And Kenneth is trying to explain his position. He says something like, I can see design everywhere. He acknowledges the complexity in the universe. He looks at nature, at the stars, and he admits, it looks designed.
Which seems like an olive branch, in a way. He's not saying it's all random chaos. He's saying, I see what you see. I just have a different conclusion.
Exactly. Do you think that would be a bridge? But then Jeremy jumps in and effectively tells Kenneth, you don't know who you are.
He interrupts him.
Oh, he does more than interrupt. Jeremy flat out insists, that Kenneth is not an atheist. He looks at him and says, you are not an atheist, you're an agnostic.
Which is just wild. Imagine telling someone, no, sorry, you're wearing the wrong name tag. Let me fix that for you. It's like if you introduced yourself to me as a vegetarian and I said, no, actually, you ate a cracker with a bit of cheese dust on it earlier, so you're a lacto-vegetarian. You're wrong. It's just absurd.
It's a profoundly aggressive move, conversationally. And Kenneth, he explicitly states, I am an atheist. He even defines it for the room. He says an atheist is someone who doesn't believe in the supernatural. That is his self-identification.
Yeah.
And Jeremy just looks him in the eye and says, you're wrong.
He actually tries to correct Kenneth on his own identity. And then Jeremy makes this bizarre claim. The transcript says he claims no atheist. Atheists believe in the supernatural.
Hey, wait. Did he say atheists do believe in the supernatural?
Yes. Which is, the one thing they famously don't do. It's the whole point. And then there's this phrase in the transcript that I have to mention because it's so confusing. It's almost beautiful. The transcript reads that Jeremy says an atheist is an egg on a stick.
An egg on a stick.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So we have to assume that is likely a transcription error. It's highly probable he was trying to say agnostic again, and the audio was garbled.
Or maybe it's some very specific colloquialism that no one else in the room has ever heard of.
It could be. But the very confusion of that phrase, egg on a stick, actually serves as a perfect metaphor for this entire interaction. It's nonsense. The communication is broken down so completely that they're not even speaking the same language anymore.
So why does Jeremy do this? I mean, what is the motivation? Why is he so obsessed with labeling Kenneth correctly before they can even debate?
I think it's about the power of labels and really the rigidity of certain worldviews. If we look at this analytically, Jeremy is coming from a worldview where truth is objective, external, and extremely rigid. To him, words like atheist and agnostic have specific, unchangeable meanings. If Kenneth admits he sees design, then in Jeremy's framework, Kenneth cannot be an atheist, because an atheist, in his mind, must reject all notions of design.
So Jeremy's essentially saying, my definition of you trumps your definition of you.
Precisely. It suggests a worldview where definitions are not self-determined. They are discovered, like laws of nature. Jeremy feels this deep need to categorize Kenneth into a box that he understands. If Kenneth is an agnostic, okay, Jeremy has a script for that. He can debate him on those grounds. But if Kenneth is an atheist who sees design, that breaks Jeremy's internal logic. It's a contradiction he can't process. So he rejects Kenneth's premise about himself entirely.
And the breakdown is immediate. You can see it in the text. Kenneth tries to clarify, saying an atheist doesn't do it in the supernatural period. He's trying to hold his ground, to just exist as himself. But Jeremy just keeps saying, you're wrong, do not tell me.
And that's the key phrase right there, do not tell me. It's a complete shutdown of dialogue. Jeremy then pivots to saying, I'm just giving facts. This is a critical moment for you, the listener, to understand. When one side views their theological opinion as just facts, conversation becomes impossible. To the rest of the room, and certainly to the atheists, Jeremy is being aggressive and dismissive. But in Jeremy's mind, he's just reciting the laws of physics. He doesn't see it as an opinion.
It's like trying to argue with a referee who thinks he's also the scoreboard. He's not just interpreting the rules, he thinks he is the rules.
That's a great analogy. And because they can't even agree on what the word atheist means, they never actually get to the substance of the debate in that moment. They're stuck in the parking lot arguing about what kind of car they're driving, so they never get to go on the road trip.
So once they finally move past, or let's be honest, they just abandon that definition battle, they get into the really heavy stuff. Section 2, the source of morality. And of course, because this is an internet-style debate that happens to be in person, how long does it take before we get to Hitler?
Not long at all. The Hitler test is a classic trope in theological debates, and it appears here in full force. It's almost inevitable.
The prompt on the floor is whether they can know what is right or wrong without the Bible.
Right, and this is the core of the moral argument for God. Jeremy takes the hardline position here. He argues that without God, and specifically without the Bible, there are no rules. No objective rules anyway. He says, and this is a direct idea from him, you can't make a decision on your own whether it's good or bad.
Which is a terrifying thought to someone who isn't religious. I mean, the immediate implication is that the only thing stopping you from, I don't know, committing horrible acts is a book.
Well, that's exactly how the atheists in the room interpret it. And that's when Jeremy pulls out the big gun. He asks, what about Hitler? His argument is that Hitler made a decision that he thought was good. Hitler had an internal moral compass. It was just, horribly twisted. So Jeremy's point is this. Without an objective external standard, which he defines as God, you have no solid ground to stand on to say Hitler was wrong. You can only say, I disagree with Hitler.
That is a chilling distinction. He's saying that without God, condemning genocide is just a matter of opinion. It's like preferring chocolate over vanilla.
In a strictly philosophical sense, from his point of view, yes, that is his argument. It's a concept called divine command theory.
Yeah.
This suggests that something is good only because God commands it. The goodness doesn't exist in the act itself, like helping someone. It exists in the command. So if you remove the commander, good loses its objective definition and becomes relative. It just becomes a preference.
But the atheists, and specifically Kenneth, they push back hard on this. They talk about internal conscience.
They do. The counter perspective is that empathy, reason, and social cohesion provide a perfectly robust framework for morality. You don't need a tablet of stone to know that hurting people is wrong. Right. You know it because you can feel pain and you understand that others feel pain. It's the golden rule, which, predates Christianity by centuries.
But here is where it gets really interesting. And you can just feel the frustration from the atheists. Yeah. When they bring up this internal conscience, Jeremy has a trap card ready to play.
He absolutely does. He claims that this internal conscience isn't actually internal. It's not theirs. He says God put that in you.
It's the ultimate heads I win, tails you lose argument.
It is a non-falsifiable claim. It's a closed loop. If the atheist says, I am good without God, the believer can just say, you are only good because God's law is written on your heart, whether you acknowledge him or not.
So the atheist is sitting there saying, I built this moral house myself with my own hands using reason and empathy, and Jeremy is just standing there saying, actually, God poured the foundation while you were sleeping.
Exactly, and this leads to a complete stalemate. It's a philosophical impasse. The believer, Jeremy, sees the atheist as having a floating morality. It's unanchored and dangerous, liable to drift into Hitler territory if the cultural winds change. Meanwhile, The atheist sees the believer as incapable of independent moral reasoning. They look at Jeremy and think, do you really not know genocide is wrong without checking the rule book first? Is that the only thing stopping you?
That friction is so palpable in the transcript. It's not just a disagreement, it's a mutual suspicion. The atheists worry the Christians are robots following ancient orders, and the Christians worry the atheists are loose cannons with no programming at all.
And that suspicion leads them directly into the next major clash, which is about the fundamental nature of humanity itself. Section 3, human nature. Are we born sinners, or are we born as a blank slate?
This part was surprisingly emotional, I thought. The discussion moves to whether humans are innately good, and the Christian perspective voiced by Jeremy and supported by the scripture he cites is, well, it's bleak.
It is bleak. He quotes the idea that no one is good, not one. This is the doctrine of original sin. The idea that from the moment of birth, every human carries a sin nature. We are defective by default. We are born broken.
But what caught my eye in the transcript wasn't just Jeremy's hardline stance, because we sort of expect that from him at this point. It was the struggle of the other believers in the room.
Yes, that was a very human moment. It's not just Jeremy saying this. One of the other believers admits that this doctrine is hard for them. She explicitly says, I want to believe everybody's good.
Ah.
You can feel the tension in that sentence. She is looking at these nice, polite atheists sitting across the circle from her. And her heart, her lived experience is telling her, these are good people. But her theology, her book, is telling her these people are born sinners.
She even says that's antithetical to the Christian belief. It's like we're watching her fight her own dogma in real time. It's an internal battle playing out for everyone to see.
It highlights the dissonance between lived experience and theological instruction. When you interact with a diverse group of people, you generally find decency, you find kindness. But if your framework insists on universal depravity, you have to do these mental gymnastics to reconcile that. You have to tell yourself that the nice guy across from you who just offered you a bottle of water is actually secretly broken and sinful.
They're an atheist, of course. They take a totally different view. It's not even on the same planet.
Right. The secular view presented here is much more situational. They argue that good is subjective. People aren't born bad. They're born with instincts. Some are born into bad situations and turn bad. It's a mix of evolution and environment.
It's the classic nature versus nurture debate, but with the added weight of eternal damnation hanging over it.
Precisely. And the host's observation in the notes here is key. Look at the visible discomfort. It is socially awkward, to say the very least, to sit in a circle of your peers and admit that you believe everyone else in the room is inherently bad or sinful.
Yeah.
It creates a barrier to connection that is almost impossible to overcome in a casual conversation.
It's a tough opening line. Nice to meet you. Pass the snacks, by the way. Your soul is depraved.
It's a tough opening move for a friendship, certainly. It's hard to build from there.
So if we are all born sinners, what are we actually worth? That leads us to section 4. The value of a human life. And Jeremy drops an analogy here that I'm still processing it.
The ants on a big boat analogy? Yes, that was something.
Yeah. He says, we're all ants on a big boat. And then he pivots to this really strange economic argument. He says, if a man were to design a human, it would cost several $1 million, and yet God has created billions of us.
This is a fascinating glimpse into how he quantifies value. He's trying to elevate humanity by citing our complexity, the millions of dollars in design costs. It's almost a capitalist way to view creation. We have a high manufacturer's suggested retail price.
Right. Our MSRP is in the millions. But simultaneously, by saying that, he creates a paradox. He implies we are very important because we are expensive to build, but also that we are just ants compared to the creator.
In his worldview, we are both. We are precious because of the maker's effort, but we are insignificant because of the maker's scale. Our value isn't intrinsic to us, it's intrinsic to the manufacturer. We are valuable because of who made us, not what we are.
But then Elisa, who is identified as the atheist activist, she jumps in. And she has a radically different take on value.
This is the critical clash of the entire episode, I think, when it comes to value. Elisa argues that she does not think existing gives you inherent value.
Whoa. That sounds harsh on the surface, doesn't it? You don't matter just because you're here.
It sounds harsh, but hear her out. Her full thought is, your contribution to the world determines your value. She believes we make our own choices, we create our own worth through our actions. It's a deeply existentialist perspective. Existence precedes essence. You exist first, and then you define your value by what you do.
It's very empowering in a way. It's the I am the captain of my soul philosophy. You are in control.
It is empowering. But Jeremy challenges this immediately, and honestly, I can see his point here. He asks, essentially, what about people who just exist, people who operate on instinct?
Right. And to take it further, if value is tied to contribution, what happens to the severely disabled? What about the very old or the very young? If I'm in a coma and can't contribute, do I lose my value? Does a newborn baby have no value yet?
That is the philosophical danger of a purely utilitarian or contribution-based model of human worth. It can lead to a kind of meritocracy of value, where only the productive are seen as truly valuable.
So we have this strange flip. Usually we think of religious arguments as being exclusionary, you're in or you're out. But here, the Christian argument is that everyone has inherent value, even if they're sinners, simply because God made them. And the atheist argument in this case is that you have to earn your value.
It completely blurs the lines we expect. The Christian minimizes humanity, ants, but grants inherent sanctity. The atheist maximizes human agency, we create our own worth, but makes that value conditional. It raises a massive question for the listener. Do you want to be loved because you were created? Or do you want to be valued because of what you achieved?
That is a heavy, heavy question. And speaking of heavy, we have to talk about Section 5. This is where all the theoretical debate crashes into real-world pain.
This is the section on trauma, dogma, and emotional intelligence, and it centers on a woman's testimony about her father and her marriage.
She shares that she was in an abusive marriage, and when she finally built up the courage to walk out to save herself and her children, her own father yelled at her that she was going to hell.
It's just a heartbreaking moment in the transcript. Just pause and imagine that for a second. You are fleeing abuse. You are at your most vulnerable, your most broken. And the person who is supposed to protect you, your father, who is also representing her faith, uses his theology to terrify you. He weaponizes God against you in your moment of greatest need.
And her reaction to that is so profound. She doesn't debate the scripture. She says, I don't believe in a God that would believe that.
Notice the phrasing there. It's so important. She doesn't say the Bible says X or my pastor says Y. She says, I don't believe in a God that would believe that. Her trauma and her own moral intuition, her conscience, they override the dogma. She is effectively saying, if that is what your God is, then I reject that God because that God is immoral.
It's a theological shift born out of pure survival.
Absolutely. And this just rips open the empathy versus truth divide in the room. The woman is seeking safety and understanding. She says at one point, I think there's safety in being heard. But Jeremy, he is operating on a completely different frequency.
The facts frequency. He's not there for feelings.
Right. And it's so jarring that Jeremy is described by another believer as frustrating. Even his own team, so to speak, is getting uncomfortable with his approach. One of the other Christian women says, I don't want what he says to reflect what my faith is.
That's the no true Scotsman tension, right? The fallacy in action.
It is. The moderate Christians are scrambling to distance themselves from the fundamentalist. They're trying to signal to the atheist, hey, we aren't all like him. He's the extreme version.
Yeah.
They're trying to save face. They see the damage Jeremy's rigidity is doing to the conversation and, frankly, to their brand.
And then there's Rissa. I loved her reaction to all this. She's a believer, but she takes this very stoic approach.
Rissa is fascinating. She listens to all this conflict, all this theological mudslinging, and she says she is choosing not to be hurt or choosing not to filter her. She is practicing a high level of emotional regulation in a very charged environment. She acknowledges the disagreement, but she refuses to let it wound her personally.
It's like she's wearing emotional armor. While everyone else is getting upset or defensive, she's just observing, taking it in, but not letting it penetrate.
It highlights a maturity that goes beyond theology. It's emotional intelligence. She realizes that Jeremy's aggression is about Jeremy, not about her. And that's a huge leap for anyone to make in a debate.
Now, speaking of Jeremy and his unique approach to debate, we have to talk about his resume. Section 6. Science, authority, and the expert in the room.
Ah, yes. The credentials. This was a moment.
This man claims to be an author of 2 books, and not just any books. He says they cover, and I'm reading the list from the notes here, the whole history of the Earth, paleontology, geology, archaeology, politics, science, and meteoritic dinosaurs.
Meteoritic dinosaurs. I'm still not sure what that means.
What does that even mean? Is it dinosaurs from space? Did meteors bring them here?
It's unclear from the text, but it sounds like a specific catastrophic theory he advocates, likely involving meteors killing the dinosaurs, but the phrasing is unusual. But The key here is the authority play. He isn't just saying, I believe this. He is saying, I am an expert. I have published about 4 articles.
About 4 articles. Watch out, peer review. That's a very specific yet vague number.
He uses this self-proclaimed authority to bolster his theological arguments. When he talks about internal conscience not being a belief of the past, he pivots immediately to, I'm an author. He's trying to establish a foundation. He's saying, I have studied the science, and the science proves my religion.
But the room just isn't buying it, are they?
Not at all. You can feel the skepticism. The atheists clearly view his science as apologetics, which is the practice of starting with a conclusion, God exists, Bible is true, and working backward to find facts that fit. It's the complete opposite of the scientific method, which starts with observation and moves forward to a conclusion, whatever it may be.
It's just fascinating to watch someone claim mastery over every major field of natural history. You know, usually a PhD spends their entire life studying like one specific type of fern on one specific mountain, and this guy has apparently mapped the whole Earth and its history.
It's a hallmark of a certain type of conspiratorial or fundamentalist thinking. The idea that mainstream science is wrong, and I alone have connected the dots across all these disciplines. It's intoxicating for the person who believes it, but it alienates actual experts or even just skeptics immediately.
It's the guru effect. You can't debate a guru, you can only listen to him, and that completely stops the flow of a real conversation.
So we have the definition battle, the Hitler argument, the ants comment, the heartbreaking trauma story, and now the dinosaur books. It's been so intense. But then there's a glimmer of hope. Section 7, finding the middle ground.
Or at least finding a common topping.
Yes. The pizza moment. It's so out of left field. Suddenly the tension it breaks. Someone mentions pineapple on pizza. My wife will not have a pizza unless there's pineapple on it.
And suddenly, subjective truth is allowed.
Right. It's okay to like different toppings. There's no one true pizza topping commanded from on high.
It's the only time in the entire transcript where personal preference is treated as valid and not a moral failing. It serves as this really important symbolic breather. It reminds everyone in the room and us listening, hey, we're just people, we eat dinner. It humanizes the opponent. You can hate their theology, but you know what? You can respect their pizza order.
It reestablishes the low-stakes zone, and that little moment seems to pave the way for the final acknowledgments. The session ends with the participants affirming each other. And this part really surprised me.
It is a massive shift in tone. Elisa, the atheist activist who has battled Jeremy the whole time, looks at him and acknowledges him. She says he is unwaveringly firm.
She calls it a sign of passion.
She does. And she acknowledges another woman, Nancy, for her still-centered quality. Peter is acknowledged for being willing to learn and being open.
It's so interesting that they praise personality traits, not ideas. Elisa doesn't say, Jeremy, you made a good point about the ants. She says, I respect that you are stubborn and passionate.
Exactly. They are finding the human element. They're looking past the ideology. Despite the heated debates about Hitler and hell and the value of a life, the session ends with them recognizing passion, calmness, and honesty. They are validating the person underneath the belief system.
And Arissa gets a shout out too, right?
Yes, for her ability to take stock of herself and not get drawn into the emotional chaos. This reinforces that stoic theme we mentioned earlier. The group recognizes that staying calm in a firestorm is a superpower.
So what does this all mean? We've watched them fight, we've watched them judge, and we've watched them compliment each other on their pizza preferences and their passion.
If we zoom out, we are looking at 2 fundamentally different ways of being in the world, aren't we?
Completely. And that's how we should bring it home for the listener. What are these 2 worlds that collided in that room?
On one side, you have the external standard. This is Jeremy's world. Truth and morality come from outside, from God, from the Bible. We are ants who need rules, or we will become monsters like Hitler. It is a world of safety through obedience.
And on the other side?
The internal standard. This is the world of Kenneth and Elisa. Truth and morality come from inside, from conscience, from reason, and from empathy. We are the creators of our own value. We determine what is good by how it affects other conscious beings. It is a world of responsibility through agency.
It's the difference between I do good because I'm told to and I do good because I choose to.
And that raises the final provocative question for all of us listening. The group ended by complimenting Jeremy's unwavering firmness. We often treat certainty as a leadership trait. We like people who know.
But in a room where people are talking about the nature of the universe, something no single human can possibly fully grasp, is that firmness actually a virtue?
That's the question. Is the person who claims to have all the answers From meteoritic dinosaurs to the mind of God actually the strong one? Or is the person who is willing to say, I don't know, the person who admits doubt, actually the one who is telling the most profound truth?
Is "I don't know" the most honest sentence in the English language?
In discussions of faith and the universe, it just might be.
Something to chew on.
Thanks for thinking deeper with us.